All right, guys, so we got to talk about what's happening in Los Angeles right now as thousands of people have taken to the streets to protest as the Trump administration and his ICE Gestapo agents are significantly ramping up their raids and mass arrests. So I want to start off just by showing you guys a couple of videos of the chaos that we've been seeing over just the last couple of days. Here we have a video of what looks to be the LAPD facing off with a pretty significant crowd of people that's gathered here. And we've seen multiple different agencies trying to quash these protests. We've seen the Los Angeles Police Department, we've seen Customs and Border Patrol, we've seen ICE, we've seen the Department of Homeland Security, and we've also seen the National Guard, which Trump decided to unilaterally deploy against the wishes of the governor, which is apparently the first time that that's happened since I think 1965 in an absolutely unnecessary, insane, over-the-top authoritarian move here. So I believe this is the National Guard that we can see in this video, what looks to be teeing off with both tear gas as well as rubber bullets in this clip here. We also have other clips in terms of some of the protest actions. People have apparently been ordering Waymos, which are like these self-driving cars, I guess, that you can order. I don't know, I'm not really that familiar with them, but apparently people were ordering them to the locations of some of the protests and having a little bit of extra, I guess let's call it fun there with some of these vehicles, obviously trashing them, spray painting them, and lighting some of them on fire. We also have utterly deranged videos like this one, where we have an Australian news anchor who is reporting live from on the ground in terms of these protests. And you're going to see here in the left-hand corner of your screen, a police officer directly aiming and firing a rubber bullet at her leg. So let's go ahead and watch this clip here in slow motion. You can see her reporting live. He tees it off one more time in case there was any mistake here. You can see him looking directly at her. He points the gun and then he lets off a round directly at this journalist. We also had another wild video here of what looks to be a defenseless man laying on the ground. You can see him sort of right here in the center of your screen. You have him surrounded by multiple police officers, some of them on foot, some of them on horseback, and then watch what these cops do as they're on horseback. They're trampling this guy who's on the ground. I mean, this is an unarmed dude, totally defenseless. You could easily pick him up. They're beating him with sticks and then using their horses as weapons. I mean, multiple of them joining in on that. We also have, even further here, a video. This one is of a guy who was trying to block an ICE vehicle that was leaving one of these scenes. You can see him standing at the front of the car here. The ICE vehicle then eventually knocks him to the ground, and he looks to be unconscious from what I could see in this video. And after basically running this guy over, the ICE vehicle basically just backs up and drives away and flees the scene. So you can see him go down there. Again, looks like pretty significantly hit his head on the ground. Hope that that person is okay. But the ICE vehicle, again, backs up, turns around the protesters, and speeds off to go and join the rest of the convoy. We also have here video of some of the choppers that were landing on the ground. This appears to be a Black Hawk from the reporting here, unloading dozens of boxes of ammunition, including less lethal weaponry. You see these tanks with flammable labels on the side as if they were getting ready for a major battle. And that's part of the problem here, guys, is that it's difficult to imagine that there even is such a thing as a quote-unquote peaceful protest that could hypothetically exist in this country at a mass scale, because even if the protests start off as peaceful, or if an overwhelming majority of people want to be quote-unquote peaceful, the state, the government, the police, the ICE agencies or DHS or whatever the case may be, they are going to bring the violence. Right? That part of it is inevitable. And as somebody who's been to many of these protests that have ended up turning violent myself, I've seen this firsthand. I've seen the police instigate the violence time and time and time again. And then when people start throwing water bottles or whatever the case may be in response to that, they then use that as a further justification to escalate. And so here we have, I guess, the imperial boomerang phenomenon, where much of the militarized equipment that we've used overseas in illegal and bloody wars throughout the last couple of years is coming back home to be used on the American people as well. And I think we had a good take in terms of characterizing these protests and not giving in to sort of the mainstream hysteria here that I saw floating around on social media. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this from somebody who is in Los Angeles. They say, in the coming days, the national media is going to call LA a war zone, but the truth is the folks protesting today were were worried about their friends, their neighbors, and their community. A few idiots will throw a rock and it'll take over the entire narrative, but just know LA is afraid right now because their co-workers were kidnapped at work, because the guy who sold them dinner was snatched by masked men, and because a bunch of their neighbors' parents straight up never came home. As Trump gleefully escalates this with the National Guard, violence is inevitable, but just know that this protest started from a place of protection, a place of love. We love our neighbors, we love our family, we love our community. Whatever the news tells you in the coming days, that's the truth. They're going to paint a vision of Los Angeles that is much different from that. Don't let them. And I think that that's exactly correct, right? I mean, we need to keep in mind who exactly the Trump administration is going after, right? Overwhelmingly, they're not going after hardened gang members or criminals or, anything like that. They're going after somebody's dad. They're going after somebody's son or sister or mother or neighbor or colleague or whatever the case may be. Overwhelmingly, people who are here in this country trying to seek a better life for themselves, for their families, hardworking people, and, Los Angeles especially being a major hub of people who are potentially facing this kind of violence and kidnapping from the Trump administration right now. So it's important to keep in mind what exactly these protests are about, first and foremost, instead of just some of the optics surrounding it. Now, in terms of the optics, a couple of pictures that I saw floating around over the last couple of days. We're going to get to Stephen Miller and his demented white nationalist self here in a second in his reaction to some of these images, but you can see in this first one a guy waving a Mexican flag, riding on a motorbike, and in front of a row of police vehicles behind him. Another one here in what looks to be a burnt out car with "fuck ICE" spray painted on the side of it. More pictures there, and exactly. So this is kind of what some of these protests have turned into, if you will. Now, Stephen Miller had a take here. This guy obviously is leading the charge in terms of Trump's border crackdown in this country. So he says, look at all of the foreign flags. And he says, Los Angeles is occupied territory. So first of all, I know that it's absolutely shocking that in Los Angeles, there would be people at a protest over immigration rights holding Mexican flags, right? Absolutely stunning shocker. Never seen that before, right? Keep in mind, guys, if you've ever been to a protest, especially one that has to do with something like immigration or something like foreign policy, there are loads of different flags, right? It's not just American flags at these protests. Okay, so this is nothing new. It's like somebody who's never seen a protest before, right? And this goes for many other countries around the world. It's very commonplace to see other countries' flags flying at a protest in that country. But it's also ironic because I guess given this standard that he's laying out here, well, then he would also have to admit that Congress is occupied territory, because go and walk around to different congressional offices here in the US and count how many Israel flags you'll find, right? I mean, we literally had a congressman who wore an IDF uniform, the uniform of a foreign country's military, to Congress. Nobody said shit about that, right? But apparently there's a couple of Mexican flags at this protest, and that means that it's occupied territory. Or maybe there's just some Hispanic Americans that live here, right? Maybe that could also be the case. I don't know. You guys tell me. We also have the background here of what Stephen Miller has been up to lately. Apparently not happy with so far how the Trump administration has been acting, and that he doesn't think that the numbers are high enough in terms of deportations. So this is from a recent article in terms of him yelling at immigration officials for not deporting enough. They say here, Stephen Miller wants everybody arrested. He said, quote, in one of these meetings, "Why aren't you at Home Depot? Why aren't you at 7-Eleven?" One of the ERO officials in attendance stood up and stated that the Department of Homeland Security and the White House had publicly messaged about targeting criminal illegal immigrants, and therefore ICE was targeting them and not the general illegal immigration population. Miller then said, "What do you mean you're going after criminals?" Miller got into a little bit of a pissing contest. That's what Tom Homan says every time he's on TV. We're going after criminals, the ICE official told Miller, according to the first official. So Stephen Miller is blowing up the narrative, not that this was ever true, but blowing up the narrative from the Trump administration that, oh, we're going after hardened criminals. No, Stephen Miller is saying, show up to a Home Depot and see if you can find any people who are trying to look for work there. Right, contrary to the narrative that these migrants are all either criminals or they're lazy or whatever the case may be, he's saying go to Home Depot and round these people up. Go to 7-Eleven and try to find undocumented migrants to arrest, right? This is Stephen Miller's order to ICE. And so we've seen this drastic escalation of the amount of people who are being rounded up, not only now at job sites in more significant ways, but also at immigration courts, which is even more insane, right? I mean, as pointed out here by Austerity is Theft, really need people to understand that they are targeting immigration courts to arrest immigrants who are checking in and following the rules, and not targeting criminals or gang members on the run, because it's easier to hit arrest quotas when you're going after people who are actually following in accordance with what the system is asking them to do. I mean, think about how insane that is, and think about what kind of message that sends to undocumented immigrants in this country, right? What is the incentive? The incentive is, well, now I can't show up to my court hearings. I can't go through the legal avenues as an undocumented migrant because I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to get thrown out of the country or sent to some ICE detention camp and separated from my family and not given due process, or in the worst case, sent off to a fucking torture camp in El Salvador with no due process. So he's actually, the policy that they're outlining here in doing this kind of thing is disincentivizing people from following the laws, from actually working within the system as intended. Now, we continue because, again, we also had Donald Trump ordering the California National Guard to go and help to crack down on these protests. Now, we also have California saying that Trump, quote, trampled the state's sovereignty with National Guard deployment. At the same time, we have Donald Trump coming out and saying this over on his Truth Social, to give you a perspective in terms of how deranged his mind is at this point. He says, a once great American city, Los Angeles, has been invaded and occupied by aliens and criminals. Invaded and occupied. Notice the kinds of words that he's using here. He says, now violent insurrectionist mobs, he's talking about protesters, are swarming and attacking our federal agents to try and stop our deportation operations. But these lawless riots only strengthen our resolve. I am directing the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Defense, and the Attorney General Pam Bondi, in coordination with all other relevant departments and agencies, to take all such action necessary to liberate Los Angeles from the migrant invasion and put an end to these migrant riots. Order will be restored, the illegals will be expelled, and Los Angeles will be set free. So again, notice the language that he's using here, right? Not that it's important to dissect whether or not any of this is accurate in any way, shape, or form and how he's characterizing this, but notice the language that he's using. It's militaristic language, and it's important to recognize that because it telegraphs what kind of response he's planning to bring to bear on these kinds of protests against these mass deportations and arrests that are happening right now. He's planning to treat this as if it is an invasion. He's treating this as if Los Angeles is under the occupation of a foreign military and that they need to send in potentially the military to go and quote unquote liberate it from these people. And just to back that up here, this is exactly what Donald Trump is planning. They say here from the Hill, 500 Marines, quote, prepared to deploy to LA, according to the Northern Command. So now we're talking about not just ICE or CBP or the LAPD or DHS or any of these other agencies, but active duty Marines. He's talking about sending active duty soldiers, a step above the National Guard, right? Active duty Marines into the streets of Los Angeles to quell some of these protests. And keep in mind, these protests have been somewhat sizable, right? Not trying to take away from that, but this is not even of the scale of like the BLM protests back from 2020 during COVID. This is significantly smaller than that. And he's talking about sending out active duty U.S. troops to go and, I guess, fight Americans who are daring to use their free speech rights to protest what the Trump administration is doing. He also said this when he was asked about it. Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're going to have troops everywhere. I mean, it sounds a lot like martial law, right, that you see in many dictatorial regimes around the world. The reporter asks, what's the bar for sending in the Marines? And he says, the bar is what I think it is. Again, don't want to be called a dictator, then stop fucking acting like a dictator and saying dictator shit, right? We also have here Trump threatening to potentially arrest California Governor Gavin Newsom. He was asked about this outside of the White House, and he says, I would do it if I were Tom, referencing Tom Homan, his one of his top immigration guys. He says, I think it's great. I think it's great. So he is endorsing the arrest of a Democratic governor in California. He was also asked what crime has Gavin Newsom committed, and his response was, I think his primary crime is running for governor because he's done such a bad job. Now, I despise Gavin Newsom as much as the next guy, right? No love for Gavin Newsom coming from me, but it's actually not a crime to run for governor, right? Now, I would love to have an actual left-wing governor in California, but Gavin Newsom is the governor, and unfortunately, that's not a crime, right? So not exactly sure what he's referencing here, and maybe this is just him trying to jab at Gavin Newsom, but it's Donald Trump, so you can't take away that there's a possibility there that he's serious about this. Now, we also have ICE putting out statements, complaining, whining, bitching, moaning, pissing their pants over the fact that they are being compared to the Gestapo or being compared to Nazis. They have a quote here from the acting ICE director, Todd Lyons, who said, "To call us Nazis, to compare us to one of the worst groups in history, is disgusting and outright wrong. What men and women of ICE are doing in Massachusetts and all over this country is making communities safer." No, it's doing the opposite of that. It's making communities less safe. Look at Los Angeles right now. These protests, the chaos that has erupted, is a direct result of these raids, of these mass arrests of people's family, people's community members, people's neighbors, people's colleagues at their work sites. You are creating chaos. You're not bringing order to anything. You're not bringing order. So, again, if you don't want to be called Nazis, stop acting like fucking Nazis. Pretty simple, right? Don't want to be compared to the Gestapo? Stop acting like it. We also have a point here from Dustin that I think is noteworthy. I mean, just look at all of the resources that they're willing to commit to terrorize people, but not to feed or to house people, right? And this is a core point, guys, which, even if you think our immigration system is broken, which I actually agree with to a large extent, even if you think, it's unfair, there are undocumented immigrants or whatever the case may be, this is not the issue that Republicans are making it out to be, right? And to be honest, and maybe this is like a hot take for some people out there, but I actually don't care that there are people in this country who are undocumented. I care if you're committing crimes, if you're killing somebody, if you're doing human trafficking, or if you're actually committing crimes. I think you should be punished for that. I think you should be, fully held accountable for that. But if you're somebody who's in this country and you just happen to be undocumented, and you're somebody who has a family, and you're working some job, or maybe you're working multiple jobs, or whatever the case may be, and you're doing your best to, put into society, to improve your life, etc. I don't care that you're undocumented. I certainly don't care enough to have billions and billions of dollars spent to deploy the National Guard, potentially the Marines, LAPD, to use all of this militarized equipment to go and round people up and to crack down on Americans for daring to protest it. I actually don't think it's that big of an issue, let alone an issue that you would require this amount of resources when we have so many other issues that we're facing as Americans. People can't afford healthcare. People can barely afford groceries. People can't afford the rent, right? And instead of putting resources towards healthcare, towards housing, towards infrastructure, towards any of the things that would materially uplift average working class people in this country, we're spending our money on hyper-militarizing our police force, on expanding and increasing the surveillance state, on expanding our foreign presence overseas as well. That's what we're spending our money on in this country. I mean, it's deeply unserious to me, right? This is an issue, first and foremost, because it's a divide and conquer strategy, right? As old as time. The wealthy want you to blame trans people. They want you to blame gay people. They want you to blame immigrants so that you're not pointing the finger at the billionaire class, at the capitalist class, for the material problems that you are actually facing. That's what this comes down to. That's what this comes down to. So I thought that was an important point there from Dustin. We also have a summary here from our boy Prem over at Zateo News Now, just summarizing the current state of the United States and what I think is basically an example of how this would be reported by U.S. media outlets if it was happening in an adversarial country overseas. So the headline here is, embattled U.S. ruler deploys armed troops against citizens amid mass protests over regime's kidnapping spree, one day after oligarch ally, talking about Elon Musk, alleges links to Epstein scandal. This is where we're at in this country. Not a dishonest way of portraying that in a headline format at all. We also have here, pointed out by Crystal Ball, that the Trump administration has apparently partnered with Dr. fucking Phil, to create a glossy TV special of their LA ICE raids. They want a spectacle. Sick stuff. Sick stuff indeed. Again, this is not about national security. This is not about making communities safer. This is about creating a spectacle, and it's about a power grab. That's what this is from the Trump administration. Last thing, in terms of just a little sliver of good news here, we have breaking news from Yashar Ali pointing out that the city of Glendale, California, one of the most populous cities in Southern California, has said that it has terminated its contract with the U.S. Homeland Security and with ICE. So little glimmer of good news here. Maybe it's possible that this pressure is somewhat working, at least to a limited extent at this point, and hopefully this trend continues. So I'll leave you guys off with there. I'm sure that this is going to continue developing over the next couple of days. Absolute solidarity with all of the protesters out there. If there's one that ends up taking place here in DC, I might go and try to get some footage of that and see what's going on. But yeah, nothing but solidarity with the people who are protesting this. This is fascism in action. This is not, again, to protect our national security or to make communities safer. It's a power grab. It's fascism, and we are witnessing this escalate significantly in real time.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying